That afternoon, I opened my mother's Instagram and saw the photo my entire family raising glasses in Napa at the exact moment I was exchanging rings. Caption, only family. If you've ever been erased from your own wedding day by the people who raised you, stay with me because I turned their word nobody into an $8 million leverage. Before we dive in, let me know where you're listening from and follow along, because the plot twist in Part 8 will leave you breathless. My name is Rachel Monroe, and I grew up in a colonial house in Lakefield, Illinois, where the lawn was cut to exactly 2 inches every Saturday, and family hierarchy was measured in achievement certificates. The living room walls displayed Caroline's medical degree from Northwestern, her residency match letter to Rush, and a photo from her white coat ceremony. My documentary film festival selections. Those lived in a folder in my old bedroom closet. The Holloway household operated on a simple principle worth equals utility. My father, Victor, ran a commercial real estate firm downtown. My mother, Margaret, sat on 3 hospital boards, and my sister Caroline delivered babies at the most exclusive obstetrics practice in the North Shore. Then there was me, the one who chose to play with cameras instead of pursuing what they called a real profession. I tried to meet them halfway once. After film school, I took a part-time position at Marbury & Park, a law firm where Margaret's college roommate was a partner. I lasted 8 months filing contracts and scheduling depositions before I couldn't breathe anymore. The day I quit to start making wedding documentaries full-time, my mother said, "Well, at least you tried to be serious." The irony wasn't lost on me that I spent my days capturing other families' joy, preserving their moments of connection and celebration. Through my lens, I watched fathers cry during first looks, mothers fuss over veils with tender precision, siblings toast with inside jokes that spanned decades. I filmed love in all its messy, authentic glory, everything I'd never experienced in that pristine colonial where emotions were regulated like the thermostat. When Ethan proposed, I didn't expect fanfare from my family. He was a school counselor at a public high school, admirable but not ambitious, as my father put it during our engagement dinner. We planned a 70-person garden ceremony at the Botanical Gardens, acoustic guitar instead of a string quartet, wildflowers instead of roses. I hand-delivered their invitation, watching my mother place it on the kitchen counter next to the grocery list. "We'll see," she said, which in Holloway speak meant no. 3 weeks before the wedding, Caroline called. "Just so you can plan accordingly, we've booked a family wine tasting weekend in Napa that same weekend." It's been on the calendar for months. The calendar she referenced was the one in my mother's study, where my events never quite made it onto the grid. "It's my wedding day, Caroline." "I know, but you understand. Deposits are non-refundable." I stood in my apartment, looking at the seating chart I'd optimistically saved spaces on table 1, seats for Victor, Margaret, and Caroline Holloway. That night, Ethan found me cross-legged on our bedroom floor, armed with a Sharpie, Xing out their names. "They're making a choice," he said quietly, sitting beside me. "They made it a long time ago," I replied. The voice message came the morning of the ceremony, while I was getting my makeup done. My father's tone was perfectly calibrated, not cold enough to seem cruel if anyone overheard, not warm enough to suggest regret. "Rachel, don't get too emotional about this. It's a small thing, really. You know how your mother is about travel plans. We'll celebrate when we're back." A small thing. My wedding. The day I was building a new family because the one I was born into had demoted me to footnote status. I walked down that garden path alone, no father to give me away, no mother to adjust my veil, no sister to hold my bouquet. Ethan's family filled the gaps his mother pinned my grandmother's brooch to my dress. His father offered his arm. His sister read the poem we'd chosen. The photographs from that day are beautiful. You'd never know 3 chairs sat empty unless you knew where to look. But I knew. And at 4:15 p.m., the exact moment Ethan slipped the ring onto my finger, my family was raising their glasses in a Napa vineyard, posting to Instagram with the caption that would become my catalyst, "Only family." That was the cut that changed everything, not the absence itself I'd been practicing for that my whole life. It was the declaration. The public denial of my existence, the careful curation of a family photo that erased me as cleanly as if I'd never been born. They thought they were drawing a boundary. They were actually handing me a blade. The first month after the wedding, I called them twice. Brief, cordial check-ins that followed the script we'd all memorized: weather, work, Caroline's latest delivery count. I didn't mention the Instagram post. They didn't mention the wedding. By month 2, I'd reduced contact to a single text on the first Sunday: "Hope you're well." By month 3, even that felt like too much. "You're grieving," Ethan said one evening, finding me staring at my laptop screen, cursor blinking in an empty email draft to my mother. "You can't grieve people who are still alive," I replied. "Sure you can. You're grieving the parents you needed them to be." His work at Lincoln High had taught him to recognize family trauma in all its sophisticated disguises. While my parents measured worth in dollars and degrees, Ethan spent his days seeing value in kids everyone else had written off: the teenage mother finishing her diploma, the kid with ADHD who just needed someone to believe his brain worked differently, not wrongly. I threw myself into North Coast Arts Collective, the production company I'd co-founded with 2 other documentary filmmakers. We specialized in what we called honest weddings: no staged shots, no forced emotions, just real moments between real people who actually liked each other. Our style attracted couples who wanted their films to feel like memories, not advertisements. The business structure became my therapy. Contracts clearly stating payment terms: 50% upfront, 50% on delivery, liability insurance protecting against entitled relatives who might want editorial control, separate bank accounts with automated transfers, building what I called my dignity fund money that meant I'd never have to ask my family for anything again. Every contract I wrote, every invoice I sent, every boundary I set with clients was practice for the boundaries I was learning to build with the Halloways. No, I wouldn't shoot their cousin's wedding for free. No, I wouldn't edit out the drunk uncle if he was part of the story. No, I wouldn't compromise my vision because someone's mother had opinions. "You're different," my business partner Mara observed, reviewing our quarterly numbers. We were booked solid through the next year. More solid. I decided to stop apologizing for taking up space. I said, the transformation wasn't instant or cinematic. It happened in small, deliberate choices. I stopped checking my mother's Instagram. I didn't send a Mother's Day card. When mutual acquaintances asked about my family, I said, "We're not close," and changed the subject. I learned to stop explaining or defending the 2 reflexes that had exhausted me for 3 decades. Ethan and I built our own traditions: Sunday dinners with his family, who'd adopted me completely after the wedding, Thanksgiving with friends who'd become chosen family, holiday cards featuring just the 2 of us and our adopted pit bull, Rosie, with no lengthy update trying to prove our lives were substantial enough to matter. My films got better during this period. Maybe because I stopped trying to capture some idealized version of family and started documenting what was actually there: the complicated, messy, sometimes painful truth of how people connect or fail to. One couple hired me specifically because I'd caught the exact moment a bride's father chose to answer a business call during the father-daughter dance at another wedding. "We want someone who sees everything," they said, "not just the pretty parts." The Halloways would have hated this new version of me. The Rachel who didn't call to clear her schedule with them, who didn't seek their approval for her business decisions, who didn't craft her life to fit into their narrow definition of success. But they didn't know this version existed because they'd chosen not to know me at all. I was building something they couldn't understand, a life where worth wasn't measured in degrees or deposits, where success meant authentic connection, where family was defined by who showed up, not who you shared DNA with. Every wedding I filmed reinforced this new worldview. Love wasn't obligation. Family wasn't hierarchy. Belonging wasn't something you earned by diminishing yourself. 6 months into this new existence, I received an email from Caroline. "Mom's wondering why you haven't called." I stared at it for an hour, drafting 17 different responses. Then I closed my laptop without sending any of them. The silence, I realized, was the most honest thing I could say. This was my new boundary. I would engage with them only when it served my well-being, not their comfort. They'd written me out of their story with that Instagram caption, "Only family," and now I was writing them out of mine, one unanswered email at a time. I didn't know then that this boundary, this carefully maintained distance, would become my greatest strategic advantage, that learning to value myself without their validation would give me the clarity to see opportunity when it arrived, disguised as their desperation. The certified letter arrived on a Tuesday morning while I was editing a wedding film where 3 generations danced to the same song. The return address read Holloway Commons LLC, the family's commercial property management company that I'd heard about but never been included in. Inside, dense legal language surrounded one crucial fact: I owned 15% of the company, with special voting rights attached to any sale involving cultural or community heritage assets. The shares had been left to me by my grandfather before he died when I was 12, tucked into a trust that matured when I turned 30. I called the estate lawyer whose name appeared on the letterhead. "Your grandfather was quite specific," he explained. "He wanted to ensure the Rialto Theater remained a cultural asset. Your shares carry what's called a golden share provision. Any sale or redevelopment of properties with historical designation requires your explicit consent." The Rialto Theater. I knew it well. A 1920s movie palace in downtown Lakefield where I'd watched Saturday matinees as a kid, before multiplexes made it obsolete. The Holloway family had acquired it 15 years ago, letting it deteriorate into a convenient tax write-off while they waited for the neighborhood to gentrify enough to justify demolition. "Why are they contacting me now?" I asked. "There's a buyer. Medical Arts Development wants to convert it into a cosmetic surgery center. $8 million. I nearly dropped the phone. $8 million for a building they'd let rot. "The thing is," the lawyer continued, "your father already signed a bridge loan against the expected sale proceeds. The bank's terms require closing within 90 days, or they call the note. He needs your signature to release the heritage provision." That evening, my phone exploded. 17 missed calls from my father, 12 from my mother, 23 texts from Caroline. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I pulled up the property records, the zoning documents, the historic designation paperwork, all public record, all available to someone who knew where to look. The bridge loan was for $2 million, taken out 6 months ago to cover what looked like losses in other properties. My father had essentially pre-spent money from a sale that required my permission to complete. At 11:45 p.m., a voicemail from my father. "Rachel, this is a family matter. Stop being dramatic and sign the papers. You're holding up something you don't understand." But I did understand. I understood leverage. The next morning, I met with a real estate attorney not from Marbury Park, but someone with no connection to my mother's network. "Your grandfather was smart," she said, reviewing the documents. "This isn't just about voting rights. It's about community benefit. The provision states that any sale must preserve or enhance the cultural value of the asset for the Lakefield community." You could argue that a cosmetic surgery center doesn't meet that standard. "Could I propose an alternative buyer?" She leaned back, a small smile forming. "You could do more than that. You could invoke the right of first refusal clause. If you can match or come close to the offer with a proposal that better serves the community provision, the board, which includes you, would have to consider it. The board my father controls. The board where your golden share means he can't proceed without you. It's not about control, it's about veto power. And right now, that veto is worth $8 million to him." That afternoon, another letter arrived, this time hand-delivered by my mother's driver. Inside, a check for $50,000 and a note in her precise handwriting. "For your signature on the enclosed documents. No questions necessary." I photographed both the check and the note, then slid them back into the envelope. Unsigned, undeposited, $50,000 to make me disappear again, just like they'd done with my wedding. But this time, I wasn't a disappointment they could pay to go away. I was an obstacle they couldn't move without my consent. Caroline showed up at my studio that evening without warning. "You're really going to do this," she said, not bothering with a greeting. Destroy Dad over some petty revenge. I haven't done anything, I replied, continuing to adjust my camera equipment. I've just chosen not to sign something. You know what this means for the family. The embarrassment if that loan gets called. I finally looked at her directly. Like the embarrassment of having a daughter whose wedding wasn't worth attending. She flinched, but recovered quickly. That was different. You're right. That was a choice you all made freely. This is a consequence of a choice Dad made without considering I might matter. You got written out of everything else in the family trust. This was probably just an oversight. An oversight that's now worth $8 million. Caroline left without another word, but her visit confirmed what I'd suspected. They were desperate. And desperation, I was learning, was just another word for opportunity. I assembled my team in the conference room at North Coast Arts Collective at 8 a.m. sharp. My business partners Mara and James, a real estate attorney named Patricia Wu, an urban planning consultant, and surprisingly, Ethan's principal from Lincoln High, Dr. Sandra Torres. We have 45 days before the bank can call my father's loan, I began, projecting the Rialto's original 1923 architectural drawings onto the wall. Here's what we're going to do. Patricia had spent 3 days dissecting the golden share provision. Your grandfather's language is airtight. Any buyer you approve has to demonstrate measurable community benefit. We make that our weapon. The plan was surgical in its precision. First, we'd form the Lakefield Arts Trust, a non-profit entity combining North Coast Arts Collective with 5 other local arts organizations. Dr. Torres had already secured letters of intent from the school district to use the space for student performances and film screenings. The Teachers Credit Union has been looking for community investment opportunities, Ethan added. He'd spent years building relationships there through his schoolwork. They're willing to finance at favorable rates for the right project. The numbers were tighter than Medical Arts Development's offer, $7.2 million, but we had something they didn't, a narrative that would play perfectly in the court of public opinion. Mara launched Phase 2, the soft media campaign. No attacks on the Holloway family. Nothing that could be traced directly back to me. Just a series of memory videos featuring Lakefield residents sharing their Rialto stories. The first video went live on Wednesday. An elderly couple describing their first date there in 1962. By Friday, we had 17 videos and 40,000 views. The comments section filled with residents who had no idea the theater might become a surgery center. The projectionist who'd worked there for 30 years still had his keys. We hired him as a consultant and filmed inside the ornate ceiling, the vintage projection booth, the Art Deco murals hidden under decades of dust. Each video ended with the same soft call to action: share your Rialto memory. Meanwhile, Patricia filed our right of first refusal with the state's Cultural Preservation Office. The filing was public record, which meant reporters started calling. We didn't answer, but we made sure local journalists had access to all our videos. By week 2, the Lakefield Historical Society had joined our trust. The state's Film Commission offered a letter supporting cultural tax credits. 3 major foundations expressed interest in funding positions if the space remained public serving. My phone rang constantly. Unknown numbers I assumed were my family's lawyers. I didn't answer. All communication went through Patricia, who responded with perfectly professional letters outlining the trust's proposal and its alignment with the golden share provisions. Then came the meeting I'd been expecting. Not with my family, but with Medical Arts Development. They wanted to know what it would take for me to approve their sale. It's not about what I want, I told their CEO in Patricia's office. It's about what my grandfather's provision requires. Your intended use doesn't preserve cultural value. We could include a small gallery, he offered. Local art in the waiting room. That's not preservation, that's decoration. He left frustrated, but I knew he'd be back at my father's door, potentially threatening to walk away entirely. The pressure was building exactly where I wanted it. Dr. Torres arranged for the trust to present at the next school board meeting. 300 parents showed up. We didn't mention the Holloway family once, just presented our vision: a multi-use cultural center with education screening rooms, performance space, and yes, a wedding venue for the kind of authentic celebrations North Coast Arts specialized in filming. The local news picked it up. Community fights to save historic Rialto. Still no mention of my family, but anyone who knew Lakefield's real estate landscape could connect the dots. James had been quietly working another angle permit research. Did you know the surgery center would need 16 months of renovations? With historical designation challenges, could be longer. Your father's loan comes due in 30 days. This was the squeeze. Every day that passed without my signature, the Halloways bled money in bridge loan interest. Every news story about saving the Rialto made it harder for them to be the family that killed a community treasure, and medical arts development was getting nervous about the public relations nightmare of bulldozing nostalgia for Botox. Week 3 brought an unexpected ally, my grandfather's former business partner, William Chen, now 83 and one of Lakefield's most respected philanthropists. Your grandfather would be proud, he said, committing $1 million to the trust. He bought that theater to preserve it, not profit from it. He knew your father wouldn't understand that. That's why he gave you the keys to the vault. With Chen's backing, our financing package solidified. We could offer $7.4 million, close enough to the $8 million that the golden share provision would make us the stronger bid based on community benefit. Patricia drafted the formal offer. Page after page of commitments, youth programs, senior matinees, local artist showcases. Everything my grandfather had probably imagined when he'd written that provision. Knowing someday his son would try to cash out, and his granddaughter might be the only one who understood what really mattered. You realize, Patricia said as I signed the trust formation papers, your family will never forgive this. They wrote me off at my wedding, I replied. I'm just returning the favor with interest. The private dining room at Caldwell's Steakhouse had been my father's power venue for 20 years. Dark wood, leather chairs, sound-proofed walls, the kind of place where deals were made and threats were politely delivered. I arrived at 7 p.m. Exactly. Patricia's prep notes in my bag, though I wouldn't need them. They were all there. Victor at the head of the table, Margaret to his right, Caroline to his left. The formation they'd held my entire life, a tribunal where I was always the defendant. Sit, my father commanded, not looking up from his phone. I remained standing. I have a 7:45 call with our financing committee. His jaw tightened. The power dynamic had shifted, and everyone felt it. Rachel, my mother began, her voice honeyed with false warmth. We're family. Surely we can resolve this without all the dramatics. Dramatics? I pulled out my phone, swiped to her Instagram, like posting only family during my wedding ceremony. You're still upset about that, Caroline interjected. God, Rachel, grow up. I slid a manila folder across the table. The Lakefield Arts Trust's formal offer, $7.4 million, with commitments that actually honor grandfather's vision. Victor finally looked at me. You're $800,000 short. Actually, we're $7.4 million over your current position, which is zero if that loan gets called in. I checked my watch, 17 days. Margaret tried another angle. Sign the medical arts papers, and I'll personally ensure you're invited to every family event going forward. Like my 1-year anniversary dinner, I asked. The one that's in 3 weeks. Of course, she said quickly. We'll host it at the club. I pulled out a second folder, screenshots of 3 years' worth of family gatherings I'd been excluded from. Birthdays, holidays, celebrations, all documented on social media with captions like complete family and everyone who matters. Your attendance at my life events isn't a bargaining chip, Mother. It's a basic courtesy you've chosen to withhold. Caroline's face reddened. You're really going to destroy Dad's reputation over your hurt feelings. I'm not destroying anything. I'm exercising my legal rights regarding my inherited shares. I kept my voice steady, clinical. The same shares you all forgot existed when you decided I didn't matter. Victor slammed his hand on the table. I need that signature, Rachel. And I need a buyer who meets the provision requirements. This is extortion. Patricia had prepared me for this. It's literally the opposite. Extortion would be demanding something I'm not entitled to. I'm simply declining to give away something I rightfully own. Margaret shifted tactics again, tears threatening. Rachel, sweetheart, think about what this means for our family's standing in the community. The same community that's rallied to save the Rialto. They seem pretty clear about what they want. I pulled out the third folder letters from the Historical Society, the Teachers Union, Veterans Association, Youth Orchestra, all supporting the Trust's proposal. You coached them, Caroline accused. I didn't have to. Turns out people care about their community spaces. I paused. Something you'd know if you ever engaged with anyone outside your private practice. Victor stood, looming the way he had when I was young and had disappointed him. But I wasn't young anymore, and disappointment had lost its sting. If you do this, he said quietly, you're out, completely. No inheritance, no family trust distributions, nothing. I've been out since you skipped my wedding for wine tasting. I pulled out my phone, showed him my business account balance. And I haven't needed your money since I learned to value my own work. We made you, Margaret hissed, the mask finally slipping. Everything you have, everything I have, I built after you made it clear I was nothing to you. I picked up my bag. The Trust's offer stands. You have 72 hours to respond before we go public with the full proposal at the community board meeting. Wait. Victor's voice cracked slightly. What do you want? I turned back. I want you to honor grandfather's wishes. Sell to the Trust. For $7.4 million, I'll lose money after the loan. You'll lose everything if Medical Arts walks and the bank calls the note. Caroline laughed bitterly. You're enjoying this. No, I said honestly. Enjoyment would require me to still care about your opinions. This is just business, something you all taught me to separate from family. I looked at each of them. Lucky for me, we're not family. You made that clear in Napa. I headed for the door, then turned back one last time. Patricia will handle all communications going forward, and that 7:45 call, it's with Channel 6. They're doing a feature on the Rialto's history. I'm providing archival footage including some wonderful shots of grandfather at the original dedication. The man who wanted it preserved for the community, not gutted for profit. Margaret's face went pale. The social implications were sinking in. They'd either be the family who saved the Rialto or the ones who tried to destroy it. You planned this, Victor said, a note of disbelief in his voice. No, I corrected. You planned to sell without considering I might matter. I just planned better. I left them in that soundproof room, surrounded by the ghosts of all their previous deals, realizing perhaps for the first time that the daughter they'd deemed worthless had just outmaneuvered them at their own game. The Halloway Foundation's annual gala always fell on the second Saturday of March, a $500 per plate affair at the Lakefield Grand Hotel, where my family performed their philanthropy for an audience of peers. This year's theme, Legacy and Family Building Tomorrow Together. I bought my ticket under North Coast Arts Collective's name. Ethan adjusted his bow tie in our bedroom mirror as I slipped on a black dress I'd purchased specifically for tonight, understated enough to blend in. Expensive enough to belong. You sure about this? He asked. They're about to give a speech about family legacy while trying to destroy grandfather's actual legacy. Yes, I'm sure. We arrived at 7:30 p.m., fashionably on time, but not early enough to attract attention. The ballroom glittered with Lakefield's elite hospital board members, university donors, the kind of people who measured charity and tax deductions and naming rights. I moved through the cocktail hour like a ghost, invisible to my family who held court near the bar. Margaret sparkled in navy silk, playing the gracious matriarch. Victor commanded his usual circle of commercial developers. Caroline, 7 months pregnant with her second child, glowed as various society women cooed over her bump. Rachel, doctor. Catherine Wells, chief of pediatrics at Lakefield General, spotted me near the silent auction. I didn't know you attended these. Supporting the cause, I said smoothly, noting how her eyes tracked to my parents, then back to me with newfound interest. The Rialto story had been gaining momentum for 2 weeks. Everyone in this room had seen the coverage, though most didn't know the Halloways were the unnamed sellers. Tonight would change that. At 8:45 p.m., the lights dimmed for the program. Victor took the stage, confident in his element. Family, he began, is the cornerstone of legacy. What we build together, what we preserve for future generations, defines not just our success, but our significance. The irony was razor sharp. I pulled out my phone, opened the video I'd prepared, but hoped not to use 60 seconds of Rialto memories from the community, ending with my grandfather's voice from an old interview. Some things matter more than money. Culture is one of them. But I waited. Patricia had taught me patience was its own weapon. The MC, a morning show host who'd covered the Rialto story just yesterday, took the microphone for the donor recognition segment. "Before we continue," she said, veering off script with journalistic instinct, "I understand we have several family members of our honorees here tonight. Margaret, your daughters are both here." My mother's smile flickered. Caroline is here with her husband. And Rachel, the documentary filmmaker. The room's attention shifted, finding me at table 12. I raised my water glass slightly in acknowledgement. "Speaking of family legacy," the MC continued, clearly unable to resist. "There's been wonderful news about the Rialto Theater preservation. The Holloway family's connection to that property goes back generations, doesn't it?" Victor's face remained neutral, but I saw his fingers tighten on his champagne glass. "These are exciting times for Lakefield's cultural heritage." The MC pressed on. "Will the Holloway family be making any announcements about the Rialto tonight?" This was the precipice. Either they'd commit publicly to preservation, boxing themselves into accepting the trust's offer, or they'd deflect and reveal themselves as the sellers everyone was protesting. Margaret stood, ever the politician. "We're always interested in what's best for Lakefield, but specifically the Rialto." A voice from table 3. William Hartman, the Tribune's society columnist who'd been texting me all week for a quote. The ballroom fell silent. 500 of Lakefield's most influential citizens waited. I stood. "If I may," I said, my voice carrying clearly. "The Lakefield Arts Trust has submitted a preservation proposal for the Rialto that would transform it into a community cultural center. We're simply waiting for the current ownership to respond." The current ownership being, Hartman pressed, though he knew. Holloway Commons LLC. I let that sink in. My grandfather included a provision that any sale must benefit the community. The Trust's proposal honors that vision with youth programs, senior access, and cultural preservation. The alternative buyer would convert it to a medical facility. Murmurs rippled through the room. These people had donated to youth arts. They'd brought their children to Rialto matinees. They were, I realized, my true jury. Dr. Torres stood at table 7. "The school district fully supports the Trust's proposal. We need community spaces for our students." Then, Sandra Kim from the Arts Council at table 5. "The Rialto is irreplaceable. Once it's gone forever." More voices joined, not orchestrated, just organic support from people who understood what was at stake. The Tribune photographer was discreetly shooting everything. Victor returned to the microphone, his composure cracking. "So, this is neither the time nor—" "Actually," I interrupted, standing again. "This is exactly the time. You're speaking about family legacy while preparing to destroy grandfathers. You're preaching preservation while negotiating demolition. So which is it? What's the real Holloway legacy?" Margaret's face had gone white. Caroline looked murderous. But around us, phones were coming out, recording everything. "We should discuss this privately," Victor said. "Like you privately decided my wedding wasn't worth attending." The words came out calm, factual. "You posted only family while I exchanged rings. Now you're about to destroy the theater where grandfather proposed to grandmother, and you want privacy." I pulled out the folder I'd brought copies of the Trust's proposal, the community support letters, the financial backing documentation. Every person at this gala received an invitation celebrating family and legacy. Here's our chance to prove we mean it. "The Lakefield Arts Trust is ready to close immediately. All we need is a signature. The ballroom held its breath. Victor stood at the podium, trapped between his reputation and his greed, between the 8 million he wanted and the community standing witness to his choice. Margaret whispered urgently in his ear, probably calculating the social cost of being the family that killed the Rialto. Caroline's husband was reading his phone, likely seeing the real-time tweets from attendees. The MC, sensing blood in the water, returned to the microphone. What an unexpected but important discussion about our community's future. Mr. Halloway, will you be accepting the trust's proposal? The silence stretched. 10 seconds. 20. Every second cost him social capital he'd spent decades accumulating. The bank deadline was 8 days away. Medical Arts was getting nervous. And now 500 witnesses waited for an answer. I sat down, having lit the fuse. The explosion would come soon enough. The closing took place at 9 a.m. sharp in the conference room of Marbury and Park, my mother's friend's firm, which added another layer of irony to the proceedings. 2 contracts lay on the mahogany table like duelists' pistols. Only one would be signed. Patricia sat to my right. Our team's documentation stacked precisely. Across from us, Victor flanked by 3 lawyers, Margaret maintaining her composure through sheer will, and Caroline typing furiously on her phone, probably damage controlling their social media. Medical Arts Development had sent their general counsel, looking increasingly uncomfortable as he reviewed his phone. Their stock had dropped 2% since the gala story broke, apparently. Investors didn't appreciate companies that destroyed community landmarks. "We need to review both offers," Victor's lead attorney said, though everyone knew the terms by heart. Contract 1, Medical Arts Development. $8 million. Clean sale. No restrictions. The heritage provision would need to be formally dissolved with my signature. Contract 2, Lakefield Arts Trust. $7.4 million, with conditions that read like a love letter to preservation. The trust's offer is $600,000 less, Victor stated, as if I hadn't done the math. Actually, Patricia interjected, with the bank penalties you'll incur if Medical Arts walks, which their counsel seems to be considering, and the interest accumulated on your bridge loan, you'll net approximately the same. The Medical Arts lawyer shifted. We're concerned about the public relations implications. You're walking. Victor's voice cracked slightly. We're reassessing. The community response has been stronger than anticipated. I pulled out my grandfather's original purchase documents for the Rialto, dated 1976. He bought it for $300,000. Wrote a mission statement about preserving Lakefield's cultural heart. It's archived at the Historical Society. That's not relevant to, Caroline started. It's entirely relevant to the heritage provision. Any judge reviewing this would consider founder's intent. Patricia laid out the trust's additional terms. The Halloway Foundation would endow a 10-year arts education fund named for my grandfather, not Victor. $200,000 annually. The family would sign a public acknowledgement of the Rialto's community value and their support for its preservation. A non-disparagement clause protecting all parties, specifically preventing any public comments diminishing the trust, its board members, or their professional work. This is extortion, Margaret hissed. It's negotiation, I corrected. You taught me the difference. Extortion is threatening to release the family Christmas card where you photoshopped me out unless I signed over my shares, which, by the way, I have screenshots of Caroline suggesting in our text exchange. Caroline's face went white. Her husband, silent until now, turned to stare at her. The medical arts lawyer stood. We're formally withdrawing our offer. The board won't approve a purchase with this much public opposition. The room felt airless. Without medical arts, my family had no alternative. The bank would call the loan in 6 days. Default would trigger investigations into their other properties, margin calls on Victor's investments, a cascade of financial humiliation. Sign with the trust, I said quietly. Take the $7.4 million, pay off the bridge loan, walk away with your reputation intact as the family that preserved grandfather's vision. Victor's pen hovered over the signature line. 20 years of prioritizing profit over everything else wrestled with the immediate need to avoid financial catastrophe. The scholarship fund, he said, $100,000 annually, $200,000 non-negotiable. It's what grandfather's original endowment would be worth today with proper investment. The public statement will be drafted by Patricia, approved by both parties, released jointly. You'll look like heroes who chose community over profit. Margaret touched Victor's arm. The Weatherbys will hear about the default if we don't sign. The Coastal Club Board, the Hospital Foundation. The social calculus was brutal but clear. Sign and be mildly diminished. Refuse and be destroyed. Victor signed the trust's contract with sharp, angry strokes. Margaret followed, her signature precisely contained. Caroline signed as a member of the LLC, her name barely legible. I signed last, my grandfather's Mont Blanc pen steady in my hand. The funds will transfer within 48 hours, Patricia announced. The public statement will be released Monday morning. The Scholarship Foundation paperwork needs completion within 30 days. Victor stood to leave, then turned back. You destroyed us for $600,000. No, I said, capping my grandfather's pen. You destroyed us for a wine tasting in Napa. I just returned the favor with compound interest. The bank's deadline notice, I noticed, was still visible in his jacket pocket, red letters spelling out consequences he'd never imagined facing. He'd assumed I was worthless, a non-entity whose signature was a formality. That assumption had cost him not just money but the absolute control he'd wielded over the family narrative. As they filed out, Patricia's assistant brought in champagne premature. Perhaps, but symbolic. The Rialto was saved. The community had won. And the Halloways would spend the next decade funding arts education they'd never valued while pretending it was their idea. There's one more thing, Patricia said, pulling out a final document. The trust board wants to commission a documentary about the Rialto's history and preservation. They're hoping North Coast Arts Collective will take the project. I looked at the contract. Executive producer Rachel Monroe. Creative control complete. Budget generous. The first screening would take place on the restored Rialto stage, with a bronze plaque dedicating the theater to my grandfather's vision. Make sure, I told Patricia. The invitation list includes every name on the Halloway Foundation donor roll. We want to be sure the whole family can celebrate together. The emphasis on family hung in the air like the last note of a symphony perfectly pitched, impossible to ignore, and absolutely final. The restored Rialto Theater gleamed under its original marquee lights, every bulb replaced, every Art Deco detail lovingly restored. The preservation had taken 6 months, funded by the trust, documented by my cameras. Tonight was the community unveiling, and 500 Lakefield residents filled the restored velvet seats. I stood backstage, checking the projection equipment one final time. The documentary we'd created wasn't just about saving a building, it was about what happens when a community decides something matters more than money. They're here, Ethan whispered, peering through the curtain. Front row, center section Victor and Margaret Halloway, rigid in their formal wear, flanked by Caroline and her husband. The price of their attendance had been negotiated through lawyers. They would appear, applaud appropriately, and fulfill the public support clause of our agreement. The lights dimmed. Dr. Torres took the stage as the trust's board president. Tonight, we celebrate not just the preservation of the Rialto, but the proof that community voices matter. This theater stands because people stood up. It thrives because one person stood firm. She didn't name me, but heads turned. I remained backstage, invisible, watching my family's faces as the dedication plaque was unveiled. The Samuel Monroe Memorial Theater preserved for Lakefield's future. My grandfather's name in bronze, permanently displayed where Victor had planned to hang medical spa advertisements. The documentary began playing on the screen that had shown films since 1923, interviews with longtime residents, archival footage of the theater's golden age, and yes, video of my grandfather at the original purchase, saying, "Some things shouldn't have a price tag. Community is one of them." The camera caught my parents' faces in the front row, their practiced smiles faltering as the community applauded my grandfather's words. Then came the moment I'd waited for. The screen faded to black before displaying a simple message. This preservation was made possible by the Lakefield Arts Trust and the mandated support of the Halloway Foundation's 10-year education endowment. Mandated support. Patricia had fought for that language. Not generous donation or proud sponsorship, but the legal truth they were forced to pay. I walked onto the stage as the lights came up, wireless microphone in hand. The applause was warm, genuine, from people who'd watched my Rialto memory videos, who'd signed petitions, who'd shown up to board meetings. My family sat frozen, trapped between their signature obligation to support and their desire to disappear. "A year ago," I began, my voice steady, "I was called a nobody by people who should have called me family. I was erased from a wedding photo with the caption, 'Only Family.' I looked directly at my parents. That deletion, that declaration that I didn't matter, freed me to discover that I did." The audience was silent, sensing the weight of unrehearsed truth. My grandfather bought this theater believing preservation meant more than profit. He put that belief into legal language, creating a provision that could only be activated by someone willing to stand against immediate family for extended family, all of you, this community. Caroline shifted in her seat. Margaret's jaw clenched. Victor stared at the memorial plaque bearing his father's name, the father he'd been ready to betray for $8 million. 6 months ago, at a negotiation table, I was asked why I was destroying my family over money. The truth is, my family destroyed itself the moment it decided some members were worth less than others. I just used the legal tools available to make that valuation mutual. I pulled out the contract they'd signed, though I didn't need to read it. This document commits the Halloway Foundation to 10 years of arts education funding. $200,000 annually, supporting young filmmakers, performers, artists, kids who might otherwise be told they're not practical enough, not valuable enough, not enough. The irony landed my family would spend a decade funding the very pursuits they'd diminished in me. Tonight's reopening marks a new chapter. The Rialto will host student films, community performances, and yes, weddings for couples who value authenticity over appearances. It will stand as proof that nobody is exactly who you need to be when somebody tries to tell you what you're worth. I looked one last time at my family. These strangers bound to me by blood and now by legal obligation. The Halloway family's commitment to this project, I continued, letting the word commitment carry all its involuntary weight, ensures that no one in Lakefield will be written out of their own story. Even if they're not considered family, they'll always have a place here. The standing ovation erupted from the back rows forward, washing over my parents who had no choice but to rise and applaud. Their signatures had purchased this moment of public humiliation disguised as honor. I walked off stage as the youth orchestra took their positions for the inaugural performance. In the wings, Ethan waited with 2 champagne glasses. "Think they'll ever forgive you?" he asked. Through a gap in the curtain, I watched my family navigate the reception, surrounded by community members thanking them for their generous support of the arts. Margaret's smile looked painted on. Victor kept checking his watch. Caroline was already heading for the exit. "They wrote me out of their story," I said, raising my glass. "I just wrote them into mine. As footnotes." The orchestra began playing young musicians on a restored stage, their music filling a space that greed almost silenced. Every note was a reminder that some things matter more than money, that community can triumph over commerce, and that sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies, but forcing them to fund your dreams. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. "Medical art stock dropped another 3% after tonight's coverage. Your family's locked into supporting this for a decade. Legal says it's airtight." I deleted the message and turned back to Ethan. "Ready to go home. Don't you want to stay for the reception?" "No," I said, taking his hand. I got what I came for. We left through the restored lobby. past the bronze plaque where my grandfather's name would outlive us all, past the box office where future generations would gather, past the ghosts of every slight and dismissal that had brought us here. Behind us, the Rialto lived on, saved by a nobody who learned that being written out of one story just means you're free to write your own. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'm curious, where are you tuning in from? Drop a comment below and let me know what city or country you're in. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you want to hear more stories like this. And please share your thoughts about what you would have done in my situation. Your engagement means everything to me.